She was 5 months pregnant when her billionaire husband and his cruel mother threw her out of their mansion with nothing but the clothes on her back. They handed her faked paternity papers, called her a liar, and left her to fend for herself on the cold, unforgiving streets. They thought she was finished. They thought they had erased her. They never dreamed that 6 years later, the mysterious, powerful investor flying in to save their collapsing empire would be her. And she wasn't coming for a reunion. She was coming for revenge. The Brooks mansion wasn't a home. It was a fortress of glass, steel, and old money perched high in the hills of Greenwich, Connecticut, looking down on the world. And from the inside, Elena Brooks felt like its prisoner. At 26, she should have been on top of the world. She was married to Aidan Brooks, the 30-year-old CEO of Brooks Innovations, a tech empire built on his grandfather's ruthless ambition. She was 5 months pregnant with their first child, a child she already loved more than life itself. But the polished marble floors were always cold under her feet, and the silence in the vast echoing rooms was deafening. The true warden of this prison was Isabella Brooks. Isabella, with her steel-grey hair pulled into a severe chignon, and her eyes the color of a winter sky, had never approved of Elena. Elena's background as a talented but common architect was a stain on the Brooks lineage. "Elena, dear," Isabella's voice, smooth as poisoned silk, cut through the air at a sprawling charity gala. "That gown, it's brave. Such a bold color for your condition. In my day, women of standing preferred subtlety." Elena forced a smile, her hand instinctively covering the gentle swell of her stomach. "I like the color, Isabella. Aidan liked it too." Isabella's thin lips tightened. "Aidan is preoccupied, dear. He's trying to save this company from his father's dated ideas. He has no time for trivialities." She gestured toward the bar, where Aidan was deep in conversation with a woman Elena had never seen before. A woman who was all sharp angles and sharper ambition, wearing a dress that cost more than a car. This was Sophie Dubois, the daughter of a rival tech billionaire. And she was touching Aidan's arm in a way that was far from professional. A cold dread, heavier than the diamonds at her throat, settled in Elena's stomach. For months, Aidan had been distant. He blamed it on the Stratos project, a new smart home technology he was betting the company on. He'd been working late, taking calls at all hours, his excuses becoming flimsier by the day. "He's just networking, dear," Isabella said, her eyes glinting. "Something you wouldn't understand." Later that night, the house was silent. Aidan hadn't come home with her, claiming a late-night investor call. Elena, unable to sleep, walked past his study. The door was ajar, and she heard voices, Isabella's and Sophie's. "The paternity test results will be ready tomorrow," Isabella was saying, her voice low and conspiratorial. "The Dr. Ramirez understands the need for discretion. He owes me a significant favor." "And Aidan believes it?" Sophie asked. "He'll believe whatever I tell him. He's a good boy, but he's weak. He wants this deal with your father. He knows Elena is a liability, a pregnant emotional liability. And the child, Isabella said with a chilling finality, will not be a Brooks. That's all you need to know." Elena's blood ran cold. She pushed the door open. The two women looked up not with shock but with annoyance, like she was a servant who had interrupted them. What did you say?" Elena's voice was a whisper. Isabella stood up, her face a mask of cold fury. "You weren't meant to hear that, girl. But perhaps it's for the best. You've been a disappointment. and we've discovered your disgusting little secret. Secret, I have no secrets. Oh, please. Sophie scoffed, examining her nails. Your little rendezvous with that old university friend, Julian Hayes. You two looked very cozy at lunch last week. Elena stared dumbfounded. Julian. We had coffee. He just moved back from London. He's just a friend. A friend who is conveniently the real father of your child, Isabella snapped. She strode to the desk and pulled out a file. This is a DNA analysis. It proves Aidan is not the father. Elena looked at the paper. It was a blur of medical jargon, but the conclusion was stark. Paternity excluded. This is fake, Elena choked out. This is a lie. Dr. Ramirez, you faked this. At that moment, Aidan walked in. He looked from his mother to his wife, his handsome face creased with exhaustion, and to Elena's horror, cold resolve. Aidan, thank God. Elena rushed to him. Your mother, she's lying. This is insane. Tell them. Aidan wouldn't meet her eyes. He gently, firmly removed her hands from his arms. Elena, he said, his voice flat. I've seen the report, and the photos of you and this Hayes. Photos. It was coffee, Aidan, look at me. This is our baby. She grabbed his hand, trying to place it on her stomach, but he flinched away. I can't believe you would do this, he said, the words sounding rehearsed. After everything my family has given you. Given me? She shrieked, the betrayal a physical blow. I've been nothing but loyal to you. She's poisoning you. You know this is a lie. It's over, Elena, Isabella said, stepping forward. We have a divorce agreement drawn up. It includes a non-disclosure clause. You will sign it. You will take a generous private settlement, and you will disappear. I will not, Elena cried, tears of rage and disbelief streaming down her face. I won't sign anything, and I will not give up my baby. Isabella's face hardened. Then you will leave with nothing. The prenuptial agreement you signed is ironclad. Infidelity clause, morality clause. You will get nothing. Aidan. Elena pleaded one last time, her voice breaking. Please, don't do this. I love you. This is your child. Aidan looked at her, his eyes empty. He glanced at Sophie, who was watching him expectantly. He looked at his mother, who nodded just once. He was choosing. He was choosing the company. The deal. The legacy. Get her out, Aidan said, his voice void of all emotion. No. Two security guards who had been waiting silently in the hall entered the study. They took Elena by the arms. She struggled, but she was no match for them. You can't do this, Aidan. Isabella. You will pay for this. You will leave this house, and you will never contact the Brooks family again, Isabella said, her voice cold as steel. If you do, we will press charges. You will lose the baby in the court system, and you will go to jail. They dragged her through the marble foyer. She had no shoes, no phone, no wallet. They pushed her out the massive oak doors and onto the stone steps. The doors clicked shut behind her, the sound echoing in the cold night air. It started to rain. Elena Brooks, 5 months pregnant, and wearing a ruined designer gown, collapsed on the steps of the mansion she had briefly called home. Her world shattered. She had nothing. They had taken everything. The first 24 hours were a blur of cold, numbing shock. The gates of the estate were a mile-long walk down a winding private road. By the time Elena reached the main street, her silk gown was soaked and caked in mud. Her feet were bleeding, and the rain had turned into a merciless driving storm. She was a ghost haunting a rich man's world. She tried to use a payphone, but she had no money. She tried to wave down a car, but they either sped up, locking their doors at the sight of the disheveled pregnant woman, or they were limousines that glided past as if she didn't exist. She ended up at a 24-hour gas station, shivering in the fluorescent glare. The clerk, a tired-looking man named Gary, took one look at her and slid a cup of hot water across the counter. "You okay, miss?" Elena's throat was too raw to speak. She just nodded, tears starting to freeze on her cheeks. She was too proud to beg, but too desperate not to. I lost my wallet. My husband. We had a fight. My phone is dead. Can I please make a call?" She tried to call her bank, her joint accounts with Aidan frozen, her personal credit card, the one she'd had since college, cancelled. The generous settlement Isabella had mentioned was clearly conditional on signing the NDA on vanishing. By refusing, she had been declared a non-person. She had one last thing. Around her neck, hidden beneath the gown, was a simple gold locket. Her grandmother's. It was the only thing she had that was truly hers. The next morning, she found a pawn shop. The man behind the glass gave her $300 for it. It felt like selling a part of her soul, but it was enough for a bus ticket. She couldn't stay in Connecticut. The Brooks name was everywhere. She had to disappear. She bought a one-way ticket to Philadelphia. It was far enough to be anonymous, but still a major city. She used the last of her money on a week's deposit for a tiny bug-infested room above a noisy bar in Fishtown. The wallpaper was peeling. The single window looked out onto a brick wall, and the shared bathroom at the end of the hall smelled of mold. But it was safe. It was hers. For 2 weeks she lived on saltine crackers and fear. She applied for jobs as a secretary, a receptionist, an architect's assistant, but her resume was a problem. Brooks was a name that either got her laughed out of the room or worse, got a polite, "We'll call you," followed by a locked door. She realized Isabella's reach was long. She had been blacklisted. Finally, she wiped her history. She went to a diner, the Liberty Bell Diner, and applied as Elena Rostova, her maiden name. She claimed she had no references, just a willingness to work. The owner, a gruff but kind woman named Sal, hired her on the spot. "You're pregnant," Sal observed, not unkindly. 5 months, Elena said, her voice steady for the first time in weeks. "I'm a hard worker. I won't let you down." "Rent's due," Sal grunted. "I get it. You work the morning shift. Don't drop the plates." The work was brutal. 8 hours on her feet, the smell of grease clinging to her back aching, her ankles swelling. Her new friends were a world-weary cook named Pops and a young, cynical waitress named Chloe. But they were real. They didn't speak in whispers about stock options and charity galas. They talked about rent and tips and how to get gum out of your hair. One rainy afternoon, as Elena was refilling ketchup bottles, a man sat down in her section. She grabbed her notepad. "Welcome to the Liberty Bell, what can I get?" She stopped. The man looked up from the menu, and his eyes widened in disbelief. It was Julian Hayes. "Elena," he breathed, standing up so fast he nearly knocked over the table. "My God, what are you doing here? I've been trying to find you for weeks. I called the mansion. They said you were traveling indefinitely. I thought—" Elena burst into tears. It was the first familiar, kind face she had seen in a month. All the terror, the humiliation, the loneliness came pouring out. Julian pulled her into a hug, right there in the middle of the diner. Hey, it's okay. You're safe. I'm here. What happened? He paid Sal for her shift and took her to a quiet park. She told him everything, the gala, the confrontation, the faked DNA test, Sophie, Aiden's betrayal, being thrown out with nothing. Julian listened, his face growing darker with every word. When she finished, he was silent for a full minute, clenching and unclenching his fists. That monster, he finally growled. Isabella Brooks. I knew she was cold, but this is pathological. And Aiden, he let them. He let them use me to do it. I have nothing, Julian, Elena whispered, ashamed. I'm a waitress. I'm living in a room that costs $200 a week. They won. Julian turned to her, and the anger in his eyes was replaced by a fierce, brilliant spark. No, they didn't, Elena. They didn't win. They just started a war. They have no idea how to fight. What are you talking about? I didn't just move back from London, he said. I left my firm. I've spent the last 3 years in venture capital, specializing in sustainable tech. I've been developing a business plan, a new kind of photovoltaic, smart glass. It's more efficient, cheaper, and more beautiful than anything on the market. I have the patents, I have the financial models. But I'm a numbers guy. I'm not an artist. I need a designer, a visionary. Someone who understands form and function. He looked at her, his expression intense. I need you, Elena. You're the most talented architect I ever knew at university. Your designs were revolutionary. Julian, I'm pregnant and I'm a waitress. You're a genius, he interrupted. Who's been sidelined? They didn't just throw you out. They threw out their biggest asset. Aiden's Stratus project. I've seen the specs. It's clunky. It's insecure. It's a dinosaur. What we can build, it'll make Stratos obsolete in 3 years. He leaned in, his voice dropping. Don't be Elena Brooks, the victim. Be Elena Rostova, the co-founder. I have 50,000 in seed money. It's not mansion money, but it's enough to get a prototype built and rent a real office. Come with me. Let's build an empire. And then let's go back and take theirs. Elena looked at his outstretched hand. For the first time in months, the cold terror in her gut was replaced by a different kind of fire. It wasn't just survival. It was an anger. It was ambition. It was the first flicker of revenge. She placed her hand in his. Okay, she said, her voice hoarse. What do we call this company? Julian smiled. We call it Aura, because we're going to change the entire atmosphere of the industry. The next 6 years were a blur of impossible deadlines, screaming infants, and the acrid smell of solder. Elena moved out of the diner apartment and into a small 2-bedroom walk-up with Julian as a roommate. They were partners in every sense but a romantic one. He was the brother. She never had the anchor she desperately needed. 3 months later, Elena gave birth to a healthy baby girl. She held the tiny, perfect child in her arms at the public hospital and wept. She had Lily. They could take the mansion, the money, the name. They couldn't take Xnos. Take Gardu. This. Lily had her mother's eyes and a fiery tuft of dark hair. She was a Rostova. Their new life was a constant, exhausting juggle. Their office was their living room, the coffee table piled high with blueprints, baby bottles, and financial projections. While Lily slept in a bassinet by her feet, Elena redesigned Julian's photovoltaic glass, integrating it not just as a panel, but as the building material itself. It was beautiful, seamless, and powerful. Julian, meanwhile, was a machine. He worked his old London contacts, pitching their idea at 3 a.m. to skeptical European investors. The American VCs, particularly those in the orbit of Brooks Innovations, wouldn't even take their calls. A man named Mr. Chen had laughed them out of his Silicon Valley office. "Smart glass Elena Rostova," he'd sneered. "I've never heard of you. And Brooks Innovations already owns the smart home market with Stratos. You're a goldfish trying to fight a blue whale. Don't waste my time." Elena had walked out of that meeting, her face burning. "He's right," she'd whispered to Julian in the parking lot, her confidence shattered. "He's wrong," Julian said, his jaw tight. "He's just too stupid to see it. Forget America. They're obsessed with Brooks. We're going to Europe. We'll base ourselves in Berlin. They actually care about sustainability there." It was the right move. They secured a modest Series A funding from a German environmental tech fund. With that, they leased a small fabrication plant in Berlin. For 2 years, Elena and Lily lived in a modest flat in Germany, while Julian flew back and forth building their financial infrastructure. Elena poured all her pain, her rage, and her brilliance into Aura. She designed windows that could power an entire building, facades that could change opacity to control heat, and a user interface that was so intuitive it made the Brooks Stratos system look like a discarded VCR. Their first big break came from a boutique hotel chain in Scandinavia. They outfitted the entire flagship hotel in Stockholm with Aura glass. It became an architectural marvel. The energy savings were staggering. The press called it the future of architecture. Suddenly, Aura Technologies was the hottest name in green tech. Orders poured in from Dubai, from Singapore, from Tokyo. Elena Rostova, the reclusive co-founder and chief design officer, became a legend. She never gave interviews. She never allowed photos. She let her work and her partner, the charismatic Julian Hayes, be the faces of the company. By the time Lily was 5, Elena was no longer a waitress. She was a multi-millionaire. She had a sleek, minimalist penthouse in Berlin and a quiet, beautiful home in the Swiss Alps. Lily was bilingual, bright and happy, with no knowledge of the cold, cruel world her mother had come from. One evening, Julian came to her Berlin apartment. He was holding a tablet, a grim smile on his face. "It's happening," he said. "What's happening?" Elena asked, looking up from the new schematics she was drawing. He turned the tablet around. It was a financial news report. "Brooks Innovations in free fall. Stratos project fails to launch. Stock plummets 60%. Elena read the article, her heart hammering. The Stratos project. Aidan's great bet had been a catastrophic failure. It was buggy, wildly expensive, and thanks to a major security flaw, easily hackable. Competitors and a few scathing articles, quietly fed to the press by Julian's PR team, had torn it to shreds. The company was hemorrhaging cash. "They're defaulting on their bonds," Julian said, his voice quiet. "They're desperate. They're looking for a white knight investor, a buyout, a strategic partner to save them from bankruptcy." Elena looked at the screen at the grainy photo of Aidan leaving a crisis meeting, his face pale and drawn. She felt nothing. No, that wasn't true. She felt a cold, sharp satisfaction. "How much would it take?" she asked. Julian grinned. "To save them more than they're worth, but to buy a controlling interest, to become the majority shareholder. We can afford it. Easily." "They'll never sell to me," Elena said. "The second they see my name—" "They won't see your name," Julian said. "Aura Technologies is a privately held corporation. We'll make the offer through a new holding company, ERH Capital. E. Rostova. J. Hayes. They'll just see the money. They'll be so desperate for the cash they won't care who E. Rostova is. They'll assume it's a man, Elias, Eric, some old German billionaire. Elena stood up and walked to the vast window of her penthouse, looking out over the glittering lights of Berlin. This was it, the moment she had worked for, the moment she had bled for. "Make the offer, Julian," she said, her voice like ice. "Offer them just enough to make them think they're being saved. I want 51%. "And when do you want to close?" Elena turned from the window, her reflection showing a woman she barely recognized. She was no longer the frightened girl in the ruined gown. She was a queen. She was a CEO. "Set the final board meeting, the one where the new owner is introduced," she said. "I'll book my flight to Connecticut." For Aidan Brooks, the last 6 years had been a slow, agonizing slide into mediocrity. He had married Sophie Dubois 2 months after his divorce from Elena was finalized, a divorce by default, as she never appeared to contest it. Their wedding was the society event of the year, a merger of 2 great tech families. But the marriage, like the merger, was a hollow performance. Sophie was a beautiful, cold, and demanding wife. She cared only for the status the Brooks name provided. As that status began to crumble, so did her affection. The Stratos project, which Aidan had staked his entire reputation on, was a disaster. It was his project, his alone. He had ignored his engineers who warned it was too complex. He had listened to Sophie and his mother, who pushed for more luxury features instead of basic security. Now it was an anchor dragging the entire company to the bottom of the ocean. "Aidan, you promised me!" Sophie shrieked, throwing a $10,000 vase against the wall of their sterile, modern living room. It was a new house. Aidan couldn't bear to live in the old mansion, though Isabella still did. "You promised me an empire I'm being laughed at. The Stratos home system is a punchline. People are calling it the idiot box." "We're working on the patches, Sophie," Aidan yelled, loosening his tie. He was 36, but he looked 50. "Patches won't fix a $1 billion hole." "My father is furious. He's pulling his funding." The worst part was the emptiness. Their marriage was barren. After 2 years, doctors had confirmed that Aidan had an extremely low fertility count. The irony was so bitter it choked him. He had thrown away his pregnant wife on the word of his mother, only to find he was the one who couldn't carry on the Brooks line. The child, Elena's child. He would never admit it, not even to himself, but he thought of that baby every day. In his darkest moments, he would wonder, what if the test was fake? What if Isabella, in her desperate bid to secure the Dubois merger, had? No, he couldn't go there. He had made his choice. And then there was his mother. Isabella was in denial. "It's a temporary setback," she insisted, sipping her afternoon tea in the old mansion sunroom, surrounded by dying plants. "The Brooks name is resilient. We just need to restructure the debt." "Mother, restructuring isn't enough," Aidan snapped, running his hands through his thinning hair. "We're going to be insolvent in 6 months. We need cash. We need a buyer. We are drowning." "Don't be so dramatic, Aidan. A Brooks never drowns." "A Brooks is about to," he roared. "Our creditors are calling in the loans. We're finished." Isabella finally put her cup down, her hand trembling slightly. For the first time, she looked her age. She looked scared. "What do you propose?" she whispered. "We have one offer, a serious one." He pulled out a file. "A European holding company, ERH Capital. They're backed by Aura Technologies." Isabella perked up. Aura, I've heard of them. That smart glass, very innovative, very successful. They're offering to buy a 51% stake, a controlling interest. Aidan said, his voice heavy with defeat. They'll pay off our entire debt. The company will survive. But it won't be ours. We'll answer to them. 51%, Isabella hissed. That's an insult. It's our only offer, Mother. Everyone else wants to liquidate us, sell us for parts. These people, they want to keep the company to invest in it. Isabella stared at the file. ERH Capital. Who is it? Who is this E. Rostova, head of the company? Aidan said, shrugging. Julian Hayes is his chief counsel, but Rostova is the one with the money. Reclusive, based in Berlin. Probably some 70-year-old German industrialist. They're sharks, but they're the only sharks willing to let us swim in their tank. We will lose control, Isabella said. We will keep our stock options. We will keep our seats on the board. We will keep the house. We will keep our money. Aidan said, his voice desperate. It's either this or we lose it all. It's this or we're poor. The word hung in the air more terrifying than any other. Isabella Brooks, for the first time in her life, was beaten. She nodded slowly. Set the meeting. We'll sign. We'll welcome Mr. Rostova. And then, she added, a faint familiar spark in her eyes, we'll find out what he wants. Every man has a weakness. We'll find his and we'll get our company back. We just have to be patient. Aidan felt a small, fleeting wave of pity for this E. Rostova. He had no idea what he was walking into. The negotiations were swift and brutal. Julian Hayes, acting as the sole representative for ERH Capital, was a different man from the friendly university acquaintance Aidan vaguely remembered. This Julian was a shark in a $10,000 suit. He was precise, emotionless, and utterly uncompromising. The Brooks legal team, once the most feared in the state, was outmaneuvered at every turn. Julian and his team from Berlin knew everything. They knew where every dollar was hidden, every bad investment, every over-leveraged asset. It was as if they had been inside the company's books for years. Mr. Hayes, this valuation is, frankly, it's an insult. Aidan blustered in a video call, trying to project an authority he hadn't felt in years. Julian, sitting in a sleek modern office, didn't even blink. Mr. Brooks, your valuation is based on nostalgia and a brand name that is currently toxic. My valuation is based on your $800 million in unsecured debt and a failed flagship product. The fact that we are not offering to pay in scrap metal is the good news. This is the offer. It is on the table for 24 hours. Aidan, Isabella, and Sophie were trapped. They argued. They postured. They threatened. Julian simply waited. With 3 hours to go before the deadline, Aidan signed. ERH Capital now owned 51% of Brooks Innovations. The company was saved. The Brooks family, while no longer in control, was still incredibly wealthy. See, Isabella said, forcing a triumphant smile at a family dinner. I told you, Aidan, we are resilient. We've weathered the storm. We're employees, Mother, Aidan said bitterly, staring into his wine. We work for E. Rostova now. We are partners, Sophie corrected her good humor, restored now that her credit cards were secure. And I, for one, am excited to meet this man. We must throw him a welcome gala. Show him the proper Brooks hospitality. He'll be putty in our hands. The meeting is set for next Tuesday, Aidan said. 10 a.m. in the main boardroom. Hayes says Mr. Rostova is flying in from Berlin to sign the final papers and and, quote, outline the new corporate direction. Excellent, Isabella said, dabbing her lips with a napkin. I will be there. It's important to establish the hierarchy from day one. For the next week, the Brooks mansion was abuzz with a nervous, excited energy. They were preparing to meet their savior, the mysterious, powerful Mr. Rostova. On Tuesday morning, the main boardroom, a room that had seen 3 generations of Brooks's rule with iron fists, was immaculate. Coffee was served in new china. Pastries were flown in from a famous New York bakery. Aidan sat at the head of the table, a position he was occupying for the last time. Isabella sat to his right, wearing a severe, impeccable navy blue suit. Sophie was to his left, her smile bright and predatory. The remaining board members, old men who were loyal to the Brooks name, sat nervously shuffling their papers. 10 a.m. came and went. At 10:10, Aidan was starting to sweat. Where are they? Hayes said 10 on the dot. They're making us wait, Isabella said, her voice tight. A classic power play. It's childish. At 10:15, the double doors of the boardroom opened. In walked Julian Hayes. He looked even more formidable in person. He carried a sleek leather briefcase and was flanked by 2 stone-faced security guards. Mr. Hayes, welcome, Aidan said, standing and extending a hand. Julian ignored the hand. Good morning, members of the board. Mr. Brooks, Mrs. Brooks, Mrs. Dubois Brooks. He smiled, a cold, thin expression. Thank you for waiting. We were just finalizing our entry. The security here is surprisingly lax. Where is Mr. Rostova? Isabella demanded, not bothering with pleasantries. Is he not joining us? He is, Julian said, moving to the side of the door. He insisted on being here for this. He, or rather she, believes in a personal touch. A strange silence fell over the room. Aidan and Isabella exchanged a confused look. Please allow me to introduce, Julian said, his voice ringing with a theatricality that chilled Aidan to the bone. The new majority shareholder, the founder and CEO of Aura Technologies, and the new chairwoman of this board, Ms. Elena Rostova. The sound of high heels clicked on the marble floor outside. The doors, which Julian had left slightly ajar, were pushed open. The woman who entered was not the 26-year-old girl they had thrown out. This woman was in her early 30s, dressed in a sharply tailored, custom-made black pantsuit. Her dark hair was cut in a sleek, severe bob that framed a face that was both familiar and terrifyingly new. Her eyes, once warm and trusting, were now as cold and clear as diamonds. She was beautiful, she was powerful, and she was radiating an ice-cold fury that was 6 years in the making. Elena Rostova stopped at the threshold. Sophie Dubois let out a small, strangled gasp. Oh my God! Isabella Brooks's perfectly manicured hand flew to her pearls, her face draining of all color. You, she whispered. Aidan simply stared. It was like seeing a ghost who had just bought his entire world. Elena smiled, a slow, dangerous smile that did not reach her eyes. Good morning, Aidan. Isabella. Sophie. Her voice was deeper, with the faintest trace of a European accent. It's been a long time. Please take your seats. We have so much to discuss about the mismanagement of my new company. The silence in the boardroom was absolute. It was so quiet, Aidan could hear the faint whir of the air conditioning system that he recalled with a sickening lurch was part of the failed Stratos project. Elena walked slowly, deliberately to the head of the table. She didn't look at Aidan. She placed her leather satchel on the table and turned to face him. That's my seat. Aidan said, his voice a hoarse whisper. It was... Elena corrected her voice, cutting through the tension. She gestured to an empty chair halfway down the table. You can sit there. Mr. Hayes, if you would. Julian, with a small, satisfied smirk, began connecting a laptop to the main holographic display in the center of the table. You're dead. Isabella stammered, her face a mask of mottled red and white. We were told you were gone. Your generous settlement was contingent on my signature, Isabella. Elena said, her voice conversational, as she smoothed the lapel of her suit. I never signed. I suppose your private investigators, the ones who blacklisted me from every job in this state, weren't as thorough as you thought. They forgot to look in the diner. She turned her icy gaze to Aidan. He looked like he was going to be sick. Elena, he tried, standing. I don't... How? Sit down, Aidan, Elena commanded, and the authority in her voice made him collapse back into his chair, as if his strings had been cut. You'll have your chance to speak. Right now you'll listen. The holographic display lit up. It wasn't a welcome presentation. It was a balance sheet. A very, very red balance sheet. For 6 years, Elena began pacing slowly behind her new chair. I have started my day by reading 2 things. The first is my company's progress report. The second is yours. I've watched you hemorrhage money. I've watched you bet the entire Brooks legacy on one deeply flawed product. A new image appeared, the code for the Stratos system, with glaring security flaws highlighted in red. You were warned, Elena said, by your own engineers, a Mr. Harrison. I believe that the system was insecure. You ignored him. He was fired. He, by the way, is the new head of R&D at Aura. He's quite brilliant. She clicked to the next slide. It was a series of bank transfers. And then, Elena said, her voice dropping, there's the creative accounting. Isabella's head snapped up. You've been siphoning money, Isabella, for years, moving corporate assets into private offshore accounts, hiding liquidity. The same accounts I've discovered that you used to hide marital assets during my divorce. You thought you were protecting the Brooks legacy. What you were doing is called wire fraud and embezzlement. That is a lie, Isabella shrieked, finding her voice. You have no proof. Oh, but I do, Julian said cheerfully, tapping a key. A new file appeared. It was a recorded phone call. Isabella's voice filled the room, giving explicit instructions to a Swiss banker. Isabella Brooks went utterly white. The SEC will be fascinated to hear that call, Elena said lightly, as will the IRS. She then turned to Sophie. Mrs. Dubois Brooks, you're next. I had nothing to do with this, Sophie said, her eyes wide with panic. No, you're not a criminal. You're just a parasite, Elena said, with no malice, just simple fact. Your role as Director of Brand Relations seems to have involved, well, mostly lunches. Your corporate card expenses for the last year alone could have funded my original prototype. Your position is redundant. You're dismissed. Security will escort you out. You can't do this, Sophie yelled, looking at Aidan. Aidan, do something. Aidan sat paralyzed, his world dissolving. He can't, Elena said. Security, please. The 2 guards who had been standing by the door stepped forward and gently, firmly took Sophie by the arms. She shrieked a high, thin sound of pure indignation, but she was marched out of the room. The boardroom doors clicked shut, leaving a stunned silence. Elena looked at the remaining terrified board members. Gentlemen, All of you have stock. As of this morning, Aura Technologies is buying out your shares at a 20% premium. You will sign your resignation papers. You will leave this company. You will all be very, very rich, and you will never work in this industry again. The old men scrambled to sign the papers. Julian's team produced gratitude and fear warring on their faces. Within 5 minutes, they too were gone. And then there were 3. Elena, Julian, and the Brooks. Elena walked over to the window, looking out over the sprawling Connecticut hills she once saw as a prison. "Isabella," she said, her back to them, "you are being charged with fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. You faked a paternity test, a criminal offense. You blacklisted me. You tried to ruin me. And for what? A social merger, a name. You were beneath us," Isabella spat, her fear replaced by a venomous, cornered rage. "You were nothing. I was nothing," Elena agreed, turning around. "You made sure of that. And in doing so, you gave me the one thing I never had in this house: freedom. The freedom to build something better. The freedom to become the woman who would one day come back and dismantle you brick by brick." She nodded to her security. "She can wait in the lobby. Her lawyers will want to speak with Mr. Hayes." Isabella, for the first time in her life, had no words. She was trembling as the guards took her arm. She was an old, beaten woman. As she was led out, she looked at her son. "Aiden." But Aiden didn't look at her. He just stared at the table. The doors closed. It was just Aiden and Elena. Julian, sensing the shift, quietly moved to the far corner of the room, observing. "Elena," Aiden whispered. He finally looked up at her, his eyes broken. I'm sorry. I was a fool. I was a coward. I let my mother. She controlled me. I never stopped loving you." Elena laughed. It was a short, bitter, ugly sound. "Love, you don't know the meaning of the word, Aiden. You didn't love me. You loved the idea of me. The quiet, supportive, pretty wife who would give you an heir and never question you. The second I became inconvenient, the second she offered you a better deal, you threw me away. You threw me out while I was carrying your child." Aiden flinched, as if she had physically struck him. "The child!" He breathed hope and terror dawning on his face. "The test. It was fake. The baby. My baby." "Did you—" "Don't," Elena said, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "Don't you dare ask about her." "Her?" Aiden's voice cracked. "A girl. Is she okay, Elena? Please, I'll give you anything. I just want to see her." "Her name is Lily," Elena said, her voice shaking with a rage she had held down for 6 long years. "She is 6 years old. She is brilliant. She speaks 3 languages. She is kind, and she is happy. And she is mine. She is a Rostova. She will never be a Brooks. You will never meet her. You will never speak to her. You forfeited that right the night you chose your mother over your family." "No, Elena, please, I'll beg." He fell to his knees, crawling toward her, grabbing at the hem of her suit. "Please, she's my daughter. I have a right." Elena looked down at the pathetic, groveling man at her feet. This was the titan of industry, the man who had held her life in his hands. He was nothing. "Right," she said. "You have no rights. You have no company. You have no family. You have nothing." She pulled her leg away from his grasp. "I'm not here to run Brooks Innovations, Aiden. I'm not here to save it. I'm here to end it. As of this morning, Aura Technologies has acquired all of Brooks' active patents and absorbed its viable assets. The Brooks Innovations name, however, is being dissolved. This building has been sold. The new owners, a real estate group from New York, take possession in 30 days. Everything else is being liquidated to pay the debts you and your mother incurred. Aidan looked up, his face a mask of utter devastation. You're destroying it. My grandfather's company. Your grandfather built a company, Elena said, walking to the door. You and your mother turned it into a tomb. I'm just burying the body. She paused at the door, her hand on the handle. What about me? He whispered, still on the floor. What happens to me? Elena looked back at him, her face completely void of emotion. I have no idea. Your shares are worthless. Your wife has left you. Your mother is going to prison. The mansions are being seized to pay your creditors. You signed away your salary when you signed away the company. She opened the door. You are, for the first time in your life, exactly what you and your mother always accused me of being. You are nothing, and you have no one. She walked out of the boardroom without a backward glance, leaving Aidan Brooks alone in the dark, empty room, a king with no castle, a father with no child, and a man with no future. The private jet, a sleek Gulf Stream that was an asset of Aura Technologies, climbed steeply, punching through the blanket of grey, oppressive clouds that hung over Connecticut. In moments, they were above the weather, soaring in a realm of impossible, brilliant sunshine. The turbulent, dark world they had just left felt 1,000,000 miles away. Elena Rostova unfastened her seatbelt, the click of the buckle sounding unusually loud in the serene, hushed cabin. She had been staring out the window, watching the last vestiges of the American coastline disappear into the Atlantic, not as a prisoner leaving a cage, but as a sovereign leaving a conquered territory. Julian Hayes, sitting opposite her in a plush leather seat, let the silence stretch. He knew she needed this. He had been her partner, her co-founder, and her closest friend for 6 years. He had seen her at her lowest sketching designs on diner napkins with shaking hands, and he had just watched her, poised and lethal, dismantle the two people who had tried to erase her. Finally, he signaled to the attendant, who emerged with a silver tray. On it were 2 crystal flutes and a bottle of vintage champagne. Its label one that Isabella Brooks would have recognized and respected. Julian poured the fizz of the bubbles, the only sound. He handed a glass to Elena. Well, he said, his voice a low, satisfied rumble. He raised his glass. That was biblical. A flood and a reckoning all in one board meeting. Are you okay? Elena looked at the champagne, then at Julian. She smiled a small, genuine smile that finally reached her eyes. She touched her glass to his. The crystal clink was a sound of finality. I am, she said, and the truth of it settled over her like a warm blanket. She took a sip. It was sharp and cold, the taste of victory. I feel light. For 6 years, Julian, I've been wearing armor. Every morning I put it on. Every design I approved, every deal I negotiated. It was all part of the war. When I walked out of that boardroom, it just fell away. I didn't even realize how heavy it was until it was gone. You were incredible, Elena, he said, his admiration clear. Terrifying, but incredible. When you... He paused, searching for the right words. When Aidan was on his knees, for a second I thought you might... What, forgive him? Elena's smile faded, replaced by a cool, contemplative expression. She swirled the champagne in her glass, watching the bubbles rise. No, that was never on the table. It may not have been hard to watch, Julian, but it wasn't easy. She looked back out the window. The man I loved, the man I thought I would have a family with. He died in that study 6 years ago. He died the moment he flinched away from my hand, the moment he chose his mother's lies over his own child. The man groveling on the floor today. He was just the ghost that man left behind. A pathetic, weak stranger. I felt nothing for him. No pity, no anger. Just nothing. He's irrelevant. Julian nodded, understanding completely. He's less than a ghost. He's a void. He has no money, no family, and no name. He is nothing. And Isabella? Elena asked, her voice hardening almost imperceptibly. The lawyers are already handling it, Julian said, pulling up his tablet. The transition back to business was seamless. She'll take the plea deal. Our team is pushing the fraud and embezzlement charges using the criminal complaint we filed over the faked paternity test as leverage. She'll be stripped of every asset. She'll do time. Not a long stretch given her age, but enough. She'll live out her days in disgrace, a case study in failed arrogance. She's finished. Elena let out a long, slow breath. Good. It was a single, sharp exhale, releasing the last wisp of poison that had lived in her lungs for years. It wasn't a word of triumph. It was a word of justice. So, Julian said, setting the tablet aside and leaning back, a true grin spreading across his face. With the Brooks project officially closed, what's next for the brilliant Elena Rostova? Aura just absorbed the last of its meaningful competition. The world is ours, boss. Elena looked at him, the ice in her eyes melting away completely, leaving only the warm, intelligent spark he remembered from their university days. What's next, Julian, she said, is we get back to work. We have sustainable cities to design. We have a world to change. This was just cleaning out the basement. When the jet touched down in Berlin, the sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of deep violet and fiery orange. A car was waiting. It wasn't the ostentatious limousine the Brooks had favored. It was her own black, all-electric sedan, comfortable and discreet. The drive home wasn't through the oppressive, manicured hills of Greenwich, where every home was a fortress. It was through the vibrant, living heart of Berlin, and then into the quiet, protected sanctity of the Grunewald forest. The ancient trees formed a canopy over the road, a pathway to her own sanctuary. She had designed the house herself. It wasn't a statement of wealth. It was a testament to her philosophy. It was built of light, warm woods and revolutionary aura glass that absorbed the day's sun, and now glowed with a soft internal warmth. It was a house that breathed a home that was part of the forest around it. The car hadn't even come to a full stop when the front door burst open. "Mama!" Elena dropped her briefcase and her coat by the door. A small 6-year-old missile of pigtails and laughter launched itself across the entryway and slammed into her legs. Elena laughed, a real, unrestrained sound of pure joy, and scooped her daughter into her arms. "Hi, my love. Oh, I missed you. Look at you." She held Lily against her hip, burying her face in her daughter's unruly dark hair, breathing in the innocent, familiar scent of soap and childhood. This was her anchor. This was her true north. This was the why. This was her real empire. Not the steel and glass of a boardroom, not the shattered lives she'd left behind. This, the weight of her daughter in her arms, the unconditional, uncomplicated love. "Did you win, Mama?" Lily asked, her bright eyes, her eyes not Aiden's, shining with curiosity. "I did, baby," Elena whispered, kissing her forehead. "The story is all finished." That night, after a bath and 2 extra stories, Elena tucked Lily into her bed. Her room was a haven of soft-lit stars, projected on the ceiling, and shelves overflowing with books. "Mama," Lily murmured, her eyes already drooping with sleep. "Can you tell me one more story? Just a short one." "I can," Elena said, smoothing the hair back from her daughter's forehead. "What kind of story?" "One about a queen." Lily whispered, her voice a sleepy breath. "A queen who lost her castle, but built a new one, a better one." Elena smiled, her heart so full it almost ached. She sat on the edge of the bed, her daughter's small hand in hers. "Once upon a time," she began, her voice soft and steady, "there was a woman, and she thought her life was over. She lost a big, cold castle she thought was home. But she learned that castles aren't made of stone or steel or money. She learned that real castles are made of courage, and they aren't built to keep the world out or to show off. They're built to let the light in." She watched as Lily's breathing deepened into the gentle rhythm of sleep. She kissed her forehead, turned off the main light, and walked quietly to the door. She stood there for a long time, just watching her daughter sleep. Then she went to her own study. She walked to the great glass wall that served as her window, looking out not at the rolling hills of a gilded cage, but at the dark, rustling canopy of the forest, alive and free under a sky full of stars. The persona of Elena Rostova the Avenger had been a necessary one. It was the armor she had forged in the fire of her betrayal. But now it had served its purpose. She could set it down. She was no longer Elena Brooks, the prisoner. She was no longer Elena Rostova the Avenger. She was just Elena, a mother, a founder, a creator, a survivor. And she was, for the first time in her life, completely and utterly free. Chasung, video conclusion and call to action. And that's how Elena Rostova didn't just get her revenge, she erased their entire legacy. She proved that the best revenge isn't just living well, it's taking back everything they stole from you and then building something better on the ashes of their failure. What did you think of Elena's final move? Was dissolving the entire company the ultimate boss move? Or was it a step too far? And what about Aiden? Did he deserve to be left with absolutely nothing? We want to know what you think. Drop your thoughts in the comment section below. We read every single one, and your ideas might just inspire our next video. If you love powerful stories about justice, karma, and incredible comebacks, please show your support. It helps our channel more than you know. Hit that like button. Share this video with a friend who needs to see a story of true strength, and most importantly, subscribe and turn on all notifications. You won't want to miss the next story we have in store. Thank you for watching.